Welcome to Email After Hours by SenderScore, powered by Validity.
We're your hosts. My name is Guy Hansen.
And I'm Danielle Gallant, and this is Email After Hours.
Hello, listeners. Now, I bet you didn't think that this episode would kick off with a Robert Burns quote, or at least the more easily pronounced version of a Robert Burns quote, but here it is. The best laid plans of mice and men oft go awry. And on today's episode of Email After Hours, we're diving deep into the world of contingency planning. We all know how crucial it is to have a solid go-to-market strategy, but what happens when things don't go as planned? So we're going to get into planning for those unexpected twists and turns that can make or break an email campaign.
And preempting the howls of outrage from our Scottish listeners, Danielle, is, of course, Gang After Glee.
Please forgive me.
Our guest today is Adeola, an expert in CRM and email marketing with a very unique perspective on navigating crises in the digital world. She's got years of experience working across various industries, and Adeola's mastered the art of contingency planning, knows just how to keep those campaigns on track, even when the slightly unexpected happens. And today, she's going to share her strategies for going beyond the standard go-to-market plan and preparing for literally anything that might come your way. Welcome, Adeola. It's awesome to have you here on Email After Hours with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited and super happy to be here.
Definitely. And we always start with an icebreaker. And full disclosure to listeners, this icebreaker sprung from the initial discussions we had about what today's episode topic would be. And I heard a new British acronym that I didn't know, and that is an MOT. So, Adeola, if you had to coin a uniquely British term for something in email marketing, what would that be? I'm curious to hear how you describe something we all know in the industry, but with that signature, British twist.
And there is one that comes to mind, throttling. I don't know if you guys in America, because not you guys, but I feel like you say stagger. Stagger the sends. But on this side, it's throttling. And so, yeah, that was one of the main things that came to mind. I remember saying throttling a lot. And then I worked in a US company and they were all looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I was like, yeah, when you delay the sends. And they were like, you mean stagger? Which actually makes more sense because that's what you're doing. You're staggering the sequences of emails, right? So it makes sense, but throttling, baby.
Contingency planning often brings to mind crisis management, quick fixes. In your experience, at a high level, what does a well-rounded contingency plan actually look like? How do you define it within the context of email especially? And why is having a strong plan in place so critical for when things start to go pear-shaped?
Essentially, what I've realized is as email marketers, we tend to just focus on our channel and our channel alone. And as we can all see, the world is changing so much. The way in which people process information and also how they reshare information, it has changed exponentially in the last 10 years. So where you would have, normal Facebook chat forums, you have people having conversations on Twitter, on Threads, on Snapchat, and in TikTok. TikTok has also become a massive rival in terms of search as a search engine and a search platform. People are able to voice their opinions. They're able to almost form mini unions online. The landscape in terms of information and technology has evolved so much that we would be remiss if we only just stuck to our channel and believed that our customers only digest our content on our channel. And I say all of that to say, it's really important that when you're especially starting or launching a campaign, to assess all of those different channels and where some of the blind spots can be. Because I had a client that changed the price of one of their product offerings and it essentially that information spread like wildfire, not in the customer service center, but online, in the chat forums, on Reddit, on TikTok, with people doing videos and demonstrations of how their product isn't worth the price increase. And so for me now, I think it's imperative to have your go-to-market team prepped on all channels. So everyone must assign themselves a channel that they will monitor. There should be pre-written literature ahead of time. So no more, whoops, we didn't know. Let's get ahead of it. We've all seen those emails from the CEO if something happens. To the customer, that looks like a very well curated email. For the marketer, that has been the worst day of their life because they've got in at 7 a.m, hoping that those 300 words will be wrapped up by 10. It doesn't get finished until 5, 6 in the evening, gone through so many iterations that you've forgotten about your normal day to day because now we're at DEFCON 1, right? So to avoid that, let's start planning all channels, all messaging. It doesn't have to be precise, but there has to be something there to work from so you can get a jump start on anything that might happen.
I feel like you're describing a day I had about 8 years ago with that example. People, and hopefully email marketers, say that prevention, to your point, is better than a cure. And email is a public-facing channel, so there's really nowhere to hide when something goes wrong. And that's why apology emails are so interesting. And when you're talking about contingency planning with clients, do you approach the concept as a reactive safety net for when things go wrong, or should it be integrated from the very start of a campaign, or maybe something in the middle? Is there space for both?
There's no space for the reaction element. Is only when there are optimizations on the existing plan. Because you have to remember that our time to crisis manage is finite. And it also depends on what the actual issue is. Some things are just not that big of a deal. And an oops, we're sorry is sufficient. But let's say just in my client's case, it skyrockets and it ends up on Reddit. And now there are 50 different people having a discourse online. And then not only that, but you see your competitors jump in and offering their services and shooting down your product offering whilst bringing up theirs in terms of the compatibility that their product has and in relation to pricing. That is something that you need to be able to plan beforehand. You're not going to know what your competitors are going to say, but there should be some form of literature around. We know that some people we might have loyal customers. They're probably not as bothered about that our price increases. And for them, what I always say for my clients is, when you're launching a campaign, it should be split into segments. We need to start moving away from this kind of one launch, one campaign to everybody. We don't market like that anymore. So I don't understand why we still do our campaign launches like that. So if we know that we're going to be increasing a price or changing a product feature or whatever the change is, we split up the segments. We'll have our loyal customers. We'll have our new customers. We'll have our customers that are about to lapse. We'll have our customers that have been embedded in the platform, but probably you should be able to identify them and have tailored messaging for each one. So you mitigate the problem before it even becomes one. And I think that's now how I tell my clients to approach campaign launches, move away from the one size fits all, and really start doing these things in relation to how we do all of our marketing, which is right message to the right customer at the right time.
That's a great overview. Let's dig in a little bit, because I think it goes without saying that there are multiple elements that go into building a contingency plan. So you think about it as tactical elements, not the least of which is how do we fix this as soon as possible. There's quite possibly going to be an apology element that you got to get out the door. There might even be legal implications. So how should marketers be weaving those together to determine what a contingency plan looks like for a specific circumstance? Some problems are more complex than others.
That's a really brilliant question. And there are some businesses that, unfortunately, they just don't have the luxury of being able to plan those contingencies. But what they can control is who they talk to and how they talk to them. And the only other thing that they can potentially do is to just signpost or make other departments aware of how they are approaching the launch and advise them to follow suit. Because there's only so much bandwidth if it's a small marketing team, that they'll have, but they can control their element and then offer advice to other channels. But if you don't have so many restrictions, I would say that you need to start getting into the habit of having go-to-market planning meetings. So when there's a campaign launch, I will say I've been guilty of this before I moved over to becoming a consultant, is I kind of just did as I was told. And I see with most of my clients, they do the same thing. Oh, we have a campaign launching April 23rd. This is the assets. We need you to go live on email, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you just kind of go, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. That will be ready soon, sir. There's no kind of mitigation. There's only a kickoff of the assets that's needed, the tone of voice, the language, and who's going to do what on what day. That needs to be extended. And if it's email that has to lead that, then I would say that we should start taking up the reins and doing that, only because when things go wrong, it's the email marketer that has to face the brunt of a lot of it. Because like you said, Danielle, there's absolutely nowhere to hide. And when it comes to then firing off that secondary message, it's email that has to do the heavy lifting. So why not take on the responsibility and start getting ahead of it before that time? So that way you've got your arsenal, your weapon inventory ready, just in case anything happens post-launch. But it has to be your responsibility in terms of email marketers.
And there's no going back, right? So even if, like, often you'll see if something's posted on social, people can take it. Let's always screenshot it or whatever, but people can edit it, people can change it. But once that horse has bolted with email, it's out there. It's kind of out there.
You're absolutely right. My sister works for a very big company. She's a social media manager. And the amount of times she's messaged me and like, I just posted the wrong thing on the wrong brand, but it's okay because I've just deleted it. And she said, and she'll be like, if anybody sees it, I'll just say it was a glitch. Like, you're so bloody lucky. Like, you can.
When I think of contingency planning, it reminds me almost of brands that are trying to create personalization opportunities or segments for the first time, where they are completely overwhelmed with the amount of data they have for their subscribers, so they don't really know where to start. And so when I think of contingency planning, I'm thinking, is it a specific issue? What are all the things that could go wrong for this specific issue? So how do you balance creating a plan that's both flexible enough to apply maybe in a couple of situations, but targeted enough to address a specific challenge?
It's not as complicated as you think. And that's why I say you have to do the segmentation, because when you're customer focused, the issue is actually irrelevant. It's when you're generic, that's when the issue becomes bigger than what it is, right? So that's how you take it away. That's how you allow yourself room to think, because you're now speaking in cohorts. You're not speaking in issue. You're speaking in cohorts. The issue could be so small, but to a particular group of customers, you know that this will impact them a lot. So you have a nicer curated way of messaging to them versus everybody else. So it's really straightforward. The issue itself is not really the problem. It's how you communicate the issue moving forward to your different customers. But in these instances, what you find is normally that the issues tend to be miscommunication, a misunderstanding. Customers sometimes can feel very, what's the word? There is an entitlement in the customer space, more and more so now. And there are deeper sentiments around everything that a brand does. So it's not necessarily the issue, it's the sentiment around how the customer has perceived the change. Do you understand? So that's why I'm saying the change itself or the issue itself is not the problem. It is the cohort of customers that will take a deeper issue with what has happened.
Okay, let's imagine an actual scenario. You're in the
Uh-oh.
middle of a big campaign launch and suddenly there's that unexpected technical issue and it all kicks off. There's bad PR, there's complaints coming in, maybe even like a social media backlash. To use a well-known technical expression, the shit has truly hit the fan. How does having a well thought out contingency plan make the difference?
Oh my gosh, that is exactly what happened. And a well thought out plan makes the difference because there is more calm in the office because you know what to do and what to attack, essentially. When you have an issue like that spirals across different channels, without a plan, you find yourself kind of scrambling. The whole departments are scrambling. The messaging isn't consistent. It's messy. It's not even in tandem with all of the different channels. So you might see the website has gone live with a message or a banner first. Then it might hit email at 7 p.m. Then you'll see something on social. There's never any uniformity with anything when people are doing crisis management, which is why this contingency plan is really important. And if CRM leads the charge, or email marketing, you can easily say, okay, this is how we're devising it or splitting it up on our channel. You can absolutely do the same on your digital platforms. There is information on your customers on social media. You can split that up to new followers, existing followers. There are different ways in which you can cut up social media if you wanted to, that you'd be able to kind of mitigate some of those issues there. But I would typically say that people don't really go on, let's say, Instagram or so forth to vent. What they do is they go on chat forums. So it's having your eyes on the chat forums and being readily available to dispel any disinformation. You just need to ensure that you have bodies readily available to be on the front line with social media. So posting probably isn't the most relevant thing because that's not where the fight's going to be. The fight is going to be on Twitter and it's going to be in chat forums. So we as a company need to make sure that we have presence on those places. And that's how you do it. It's about assigning those roles and making sure that there's a presence of the business on those particular platforms, not getting the right post out, or making sure that the hero image is the same as the bloody image on Twitter and whatever. It's irrelevant.
I reckon that's quite possibly going to be the most important takeout of this whole conversation. Danielle wanted me to share a little story about a guy I met a few years ago. He was the email manager for one of the Premiership football clubs, soccer for our American listeners. And they're one of those like not terribly successful clubs. They lose as many matches as they win. And he'd send out their newsletters on a Monday with a sort of wrap up of the previous weekend's match, as he knew full well that if they'd had a bad loss, that their supporters were still going to be mad at him. And he would mitigate by only sending out the newsletter on maybe like a Wednesday or so if they'd had that bad loss, just to give everyone a chance to calm down and get over it and then go again. Danielle, I know you are itching to ask if maybe there's like a real life example.
I always want a real life example. I'm sure listeners would love to hear an example of where one of your contingency plans was really put to the test, and how did it play out, and what lessons do you think other marketers could benefit from if they're listening to it?
This one was real life example. An events company had sent out a campaign it was twofold. So there was a change in which customers would be interacting with this events platform. And I think one of the main issues was the tone in which the original campaign was written. And so when it went out, a lot of the customers, and it wasn't existing customers, it was also just prospects. So they kind of sent it to everybody. People that were also in like deal stages, because as much as they have a B2C element, so you can go on and buy your tickets for events and stuff like that. But there is a massive B2B element as well. So there are businesses that want to host their events on this particular platform. And those leads are also kind of been added to the email subscriber list. So when they communicated their change, when they communicated the pricing change and the structure, and the tone wasn't necessarily correct, it affected not only the way in which customers interacted with the brand, but it affected a lot of those leads that were in deal stages because they felt as though the sales agents were telling them one thing, but the company overall was doing something else.
Oh, I can't hide my face.
And I wasn't there at the time to mitigate it, honey. So, so as Guy said, shit just hit the fan. And they try to kind of control the narrative on some of their own owned channels. The mistake that they made was they didn't jump into the actual forums and the chat social forums because it's an oversight. Not that they wouldn't think that the conversations would be happening there, but it's just not in your day to day when you're doing the reporting of how your channels are doing. You're not looking at activity on external channels that you don't control because it doesn't add to your revenue numbers, right? And that's the blind spot. So they missed out on this conversation that was spiraling on chat forums, but thought they were doing enough damage control on their own channels, but that wasn't enough. And then there was hardly any support for the sales team that were trying to close deals, but couldn't because their messaging now wasn't aligned with the business's messaging. So that's why I say that everything has to be done in cohorts and in segments. And if you can, stagger the communication so that you can control the flow. And you also can identify who the bloody troublemakers are. So if your gold star customers have gone out first and nothing is happening, you can sure bet your horses it's not them. Then you start staggering out cohort by cohort. You're able to identify, you can target the source, right? So that's the art of war, my love. And that is one real life example that unfortunately we didn't get to trouble contingency plan, but they definitely have learned. And with my recommendations, they're applying this kind of tiered approach to campaign launches and contingency planning.
We all dream of campaigns going viral for the right reasons. I think, as we've discussed today, they can quite possibly go viral for all the wrong reasons. And even with a contingency plan in place, is there ever a time where the sender's actually just got to take their hands off the steering wheel and go, it's beyond control, we just got to let it burn out now?
I would love to say yes. And perhaps maybe even a decade ago. A decade? Yeah. Maybe about a decade ago, there was more like you'd have that kind of like your heart is in your throat. You don't want to, and this was before remote working. So you'd be at your desk and you're too scared to even make a cup of tea because you feel like you've got to be seen at your damn desk, doing everything you can to fix it. You're kind of gingerly eating your lunch. So we punished ourselves a lot, like a decade ago, through our kind of physical behavior in the office. But we never were kind of crucified, or we were allowed to let it go, but you just kind of acted like the martyr because you just had to show that you're sorry. But when you're going to have your little chin wag with one of your colleagues, you're kind of effing and blinding, like, what do they expect me to do? You know how it goes. And then the next day, all is forgiven and you just crack on. But now I just feel like there is just so much more onus on the channel, onus on the data. I feel like the customer data has not become the business's responsibility, but yours. You have been employed as the custodian of this information, of this data. You were hired because you had demonstrated that you are the best at this. And so anything that happens, it's your head. And that's how it feels now. It doesn't feel like it's a kumbaya. We are all in this together. Let's kind of do a think tank brainstorming. It's very much, that was email. They did that. They email. We can support if we have to, but we have our own targets and we have our own thing that we need to crack on with. That's my take. Maybe somebody else might have a very different viewpoint, but I just feel like we've become the guardians of the channel, that we no longer have the liberty of being able to just say, whoops, let me just fall back here.
I do feel like it's part of the way that culture is shifting. It's like nitpick, pick apart, dissect, no forgiveness, right? That is when I take the opportunity to close my laptop and go for a walk. Like, it's just, I got to get out of here. But I love this conversation. I think it's so interesting because we always talk about the importance of segmentation, but I never really thought about that from the perspective of contingency planning. So that's amazing. But as we wrap up, Adeola, if you could dive into another email marketing topic outside and completely separate from contingency planning, what would you pick? What's one area that you're itching to explore next?
Good question. I would really like to start delving into AI. I know that's so taboo. And believe me, when all this AI stuff started kicking off, I was so anti the conversation. Like I really was. Maybe it was ignorance, who knows? But I'm hearing about some really interesting tools, being able to dissect your customer base, create personas from that information, and then also curate not only the sequence, but the messaging, like the actual tone and copy that would appease this particular persona, and then kind of disseminate that at scale. And that's a conversation I'd love to be a part of, or even listen in on how we feel that's going to work. Would that be the new style of segmentation? So no longer looking at customer attributes like the way I was describing? Is it now about personas? Is that the future of how we start marketing? We market to people's personas. And how is that even categorized? That for me would be super interesting.
I feel like I want us to do an episode about what happens when your email AI starts to go a bit rogue. And what kind of contingency plan might you need to deal with that?
Yeah, Guy, that's a good one. Because did you hear? I can't remember the company it was, but there was someone's like chatbot online that started swearing at the customer. Yeah, like really swearing. And I just was like, how do you even? what
I just love the idea of a fed up bot. Like,
Yeah,
just, exactly.
Yes, stop asking me all these stupid effing questions.
check the FAQs, hun.
Okay, sounds like we're lining up your next appearance already, Adeola. But
Love it.
as far as today's goes, it's been an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this. I really love speaking to you guys. So thank
And
you.
likewise, feelings mutual.
And of course, Guy and I are always seeking new guests to feature on future episodes of the podcast. So if there's any of you out there right now that might like to come and join us on an upcoming episode of Email After Hours, just drop us a comment or ping us on LinkedIn. If there's a topic you love, let's get into it. And in the meantime, we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.
Be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.com for loads more great resources to help you become a stronger sender.
To all you sleepless senders out there, thank you for joining us after hours and see you next time.